Hi, we're Connor and Annie Hughes. We've been at Westridge for the past 3.5 years. So Young Life is a relational ministry for teenagers, and I was actually on staff right after college for 5 years with Young Life. And then Annie and I actually met at a summer camp where I brought guys from the area to camp, and Annie was actually an intern.
So Connor comes and gets milkshakes, 3 times a day for a week. And then at the end, he hands me a note saying that he'd like to stay in touch. And I thought that was a bit too vague. And so I hunted him down before he got on a bus and said I'd actually like to go on a date with him. So then Connor went back to Georgia, I went back to Texas, and we dated long distance for 7 months, got engaged, and then got married after 8 months.
I think my family really taught me a lot about adventure growing up and experiencing different cultures, and just began to have a passion for different people and different things and adventure.
And the Lord has a sense of humor bringing us together, because I'm about as snug bug, don't really want to rock the boat in anything crazy, outdoors to read a book on a bench kind of thing, not backpacking.
Yeah, I really thought that calling to missions had to be the furthest out place. But then God began to really stir my heart toward, hey, what about the people next door? What about the people in the next county, the next city?
So I went to school to be a nurse, and I grew up in Texas with my family. I'm very close to them, so I really thought I was going to spend my whole life in Texas as a nurse. I lived in Australia when I was younger, so love people outside of the country, but really didn't feel called to international missions until I met Connor, and then we started praying through unifying our calling together, and the Lord answered that of now it's a joint mission for both of us. But over 2 years of just praying that repetitively, it turned into a very loud of, you can't stay here. We have something else for you. But then when we kept hearing the Richardsons talk about what they were doing in Scotland, again, that whisper kept going in my heart, and it kept growing louder and louder of, we want to support what you're doing, but we also want to be a part of what you're doing, and we feel called to be a part of what you're doing. And when Connor and Paul had some conversations about that, Paul is very big on wrestling with the burden of your own calling. So he let us process that for about 2.5 years, praying about that individually, waiting for our hearts to be united on it, and then brought it forth to the Richardsons, and found that they had a united heart on it too.
It's estimated that only about 1 to 2% of the country of Scotland know Jesus Christ and have a personal relationship with him. Around 70 to 80% of 25-year-olds and under would consider themselves to have no religion, and that's growing at about 5 to 6% a year. And so really, youth, I think, are the most potential for revival and opportunity, but also are really stepping away from faith at the fastest numbers in Scotland. About a year ago, had a moment where we realized, God, this is what we have on our hearts. This is what you have burdened us for, something that we prayed is, God, not that we just have a calling, but burden our hearts for the Scottish people. We want it to be about them and the gospel mission that God would be calling us to, not just us going on this great mission adventure.
So we said yes to Scotland and committed to going before we'd ever set foot in the country before. And so when we went on our vision trip in June, it was just such a kind way of the Lord showing up and just affirming our love for the people, the city. We immediately felt at home in a place that it's not natural for people of our personalities to feel at home in.
We walked the streets, we would walk next to a church, and we said, that's really beautiful. And Paul, or our team, whoever we were with, would share, that's a nightclub now, or that's a cafe, that's an information center. And so again, when you look at Scotland from the outside, you think, wow, so much church history, so much, beautiful buildings, but then when you really walk through, there's some amazing churches there. There's just not many people in them. The spiritual need there is so real and so true. And so though we felt at home, we realized, man, this is a God-sized need. And so really just praying yes, God, we are 2 people and you've called us, but knowing it's going to have to be so much bigger than just the 2 of us. And really our big prayer and dream for Take Hold Church is that we would reach the lost people of Scotland, but then also raise up locals and other internationals then to reach the next village, the next city, the next country. And that idea of, hey, even if our church doesn't grow big, that it'll grow out, and really seeing God multiply. And again, raise up a country that has turned far from him, but then that can reach their own people in a way that we just play a small part, but a really cool part of just seeing what God's going to do.